Hello, thank you for joining us today. It's Monday, it's very sunny here in New York, so I'm very excited to be here, and I'm also very excited about this event because I am sure I'm going to learn a lot. My name is Eduardo. I am a community events manager at Modern Sales Pros, and my job here today is very easy. I just need to make sure everyone will get the most out of this panel with Quota Path. This event is organized and hosted by Modern Sales Pros. And for those of you not familiar with MSP, you are 100% missing out because we are the world's largest and biggest revenue leadership community for people in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related supported disciplines. Our mission is to create a great environment for our 22,000 and growing members to answer questions they would struggle to solve on their own and help them see solutions they may not know about. We do that through great live sessions like the one you're about to experience here today, through our robust online forum, and in the near future, in-person events. We have some exciting things coming up. If you like this content today, and I'm sure you will love our Sales Reimagine Summit happening now in July from July 12th to July 14th. I'm gonna put a link in the chat soon so you can register for the event. And then you will enjoy more panels like this one today. But for now, let's focus on how to get the most out of this panel, this session with Quota Path. So I have some housekeeping notes for us. And the first is that this event is being recorded. You'll be able to access the recording in the MSP previous events page. And I will also send a follow-up email for everyone with the recording. And please use the Q&A section. I was talking with my panelists in the backstage, and they were saying like they love answering questions. So let's shower them with questions. Let's make their week start very happy for them with a lot of questions for them to answer. And now I want to introduce you to Ryan. He's gonna tell us a little bit about Quota Path, our amazing sponsor for today. Ryan, can you unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about Quota Path and yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted, correct? Hi, everyone. Thanks, Eduardo. My name is Ryan Milligan. I'm Senior Director of Revenue Operations here at QuotaPath. QuotaPath is a commission tracking and compensation planning tool and software built for sales teams. We enable revenue operations and finance teams to create commission and compensation plans in a no-code environment and quickly build comp plans. But more than that, we enable the ability to share them with sales members directly so individual reps can see how they're pacing towards quota and what happens if they close this big deal, what that means for rates and accelerators. So we're building really a tool that supports both the RevOps and finance practice in building and calculating commissions, but also from a motivational perspective for individual sellers and sales teams to hit quota and crush goals, which is the big goal for us. So thank you for having us, and we're really excited to be here.
We are very excited to have this event with QuotaPath because they're doing amazing things and they're helping everyone in sales to do a better job. And Ryan is joined today by this amazing panel of speakers. We have another person from QuotaPath, Graham. He's going to be your moderator for today. So I am going to pass the mic to Graham so we can start having a lot of fun with all these amazing people here. And again, please use the Q&A. You saw Will say in the chat that he does love questions. So let's send him a lot of questions. Graham, I'm going to pass the mic for you right now, and you can introduce yourself, the speakers, and the topic for today. And I'll be back later for closing remarks, but I'll be watching live and taking a lot of notes. Graham?
Excellent. Thank you, Eduardo. So we are going to do it a little bit different today. We're going to do, we have a few slides Ryan and I are going to cover. And then once we are done with those slides, we're going to turn it into a panel discussion. But I want to just kick us back to this slide here. So Graham Collins, Chief of Staff at QuotaPath. I call myself a Chief of Staff and resident sales nerd. A major function of my role is to sit down with sales leaders and RevOps and finance leaders and help them build out their compensation plans and compensation strategy. So I've done over 350 of those calls with sales and RevOps leaders like yourselves. So that's me. I'm going to be talking a little bit and then turning into kind of a moderator. But Joyce, would you mind giving us a quick introduction for yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I love this topic. My name is Joyce. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Alaris Global. We help American sales leaders get remote jobs with global companies that are expanding to the US. So you can work from anywhere, get paid more, and help an international company with its global expansion. So great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Joyce. Will, what would you give us a quick intro?
Absolutely, Graham. Excited to be here. Will Foley. I'm the VP of RevOps at Brazen. We help our customers reach, convert, and accelerate their hiring processes through virtual engagement tools. So very excited to be part of this conversation because data-backed sales practices is just, it's what I nerd out about. So really excited to learn from this panel.
Excellent. I'm really outgunned when it comes to RevOps prowess here, while the rest of the panels, I'm like a makeshift RevOps leader at best. So I'm feeling a little bit underprepared compared to the other folks, but that's all right. So let's talk a little bit about data-backed sales practices for enhanced sellers. I think that may be able to say or how I learned to stop worrying or how I stopped worrying and learned to love sales metrics might be kind of a sub headline of this, but this slide just introduces us again. Ryan gave a quick introduction of himself. He leads our RevOps at Quota. I do a whole lot of everything, come from more of a sales and SDR leadership background. And the reason that we're talking today is that there are a lot of metrics. There are a lot of sales metrics out there. And I was reading a HubSpot blog the other day that was like, if you ask a sales leader which sales metrics they care about, their answer might be yes. And that's what I've seen historically, is that we have so many different metrics that are being considered on the sales organization: qualified to close, qualification rate, meetings to close, ramp rep time, quota attainment, activities, all of these things. And all of it is slicing and dicing data in a bunch of different ways. And while the people who, like me and people on this call, may be very used to these metrics and may be able to talk about these metrics, we wanted to hone it down into a few metrics that we really think are important if we had to pick just a few. So Ryan and I are going to chat a little bit with Joyce and Will. If y'all want to chime in, you're more than welcome to, but we're going to hone in on three that we've identified as some of the most important ones for us. So the first one is demo to close rate. And Ryan, I know that this was one that was really important to you. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you use it, why you use it, and how you can turn it into a coaching mechanism.
Yeah, I think for me, demo to close rate is a really clear signal and flag of, are you talking to the right ICP or your kind of ideal customer profile? For us, when we think about the demos that we're running and we spend a lot of time and are very open on our website with demo bookings. You come to our website, we have a very seamless process for you to come, click, you can grab time in 2 minutes. And that's very important to us. We want to have a high volume of people coming to book demos and looking at Quota Path. But what that does is when you have a higher volume of demos at the top of your funnel, you really want to understand the quality of the people or the prospects coming to your website and how well you're nurturing them through that process. And so for us, demo to close rate is something that we specifically watch, especially as we expand our ICP and target new industries and verticals and company sizes. It's really the health metric to me. It's of the people who are coming and booking a demo with your sales team, what percentage of them are closing and signing up with Quota Path. Now, the thing I always watch, and the reason we picked a couple metrics here, is any one metric is gamified and able to be gamified, right? If you only hold demos with people you think are very, very likely to close, and you gate demos elsewhere, you could jack up your demo to close rate. Or if you go door to door and just show Quota Path on a laptop to everybody in your neighborhood, you'll probably have a lower demo to close rate. So we pick a couple of these metrics really, really specifically in tandem. And I think the thing here to really keep an eye on is, how is this metric changing over time for your business as you expand the types of people you're talking to? For us, as an example, we talk to a lot of RevOps leaders and a lot of sales leaders and a lot of finance leaders. What is our demo to close rate for those different types of people having conversations with us, or different verticals or different industries? It's a really helpful thing for us to measure in terms of overall quality and health.
Awesome. Thanks. And I think that dovetails really well into the next couple of metrics. One of which is time to close. And this is something that I'm pretty passionate about. I actually did a deep dive into this by texting and asking a few different people that I've worked with, investors and folks in other communities that I've worked with, talking about time to close, or sometimes it's called sales cycle, sometimes it's called sales velocity if you add in an additional layer to it. So I put in here that time to close, it's pretty straightforward. Calculating mean or median number of days to close is also very important. The other thing that's important to note is what you're measuring. Is it from op creation to close? Is it first meeting to close? And actually each one of those different areas, and this is on the right-hand side there under how to coach, is identifying bottlenecks. Maybe everybody has the same exact, each rep has the same exact number of days from op creation to close, but one rep really struggles with the closing process, sends everything to legal or has some way of slowing it down in that end of funnel. Whereas another rep may have a long time period in that qualification because they run trials and proof of concepts and things like that. So another really important thing that I dove into here, I wrote advanced, divide the ACV by the sales cycle. This is the idea of sales velocity. And this gets thrown out as well from, I think it was a similar HubSpot blog that I was reading, but oftentimes this is talked about as an aggregate. So your entire organization, how much revenue do you generate over what period of time? How many ops are you closing? But this is something that I haven't seen talked about a ton. The idea of you take your average contract value and you divide it by the number of days in the sales cycle, and it tells you how much your reps are closing per day. If you ask somebody just straight out, like, would you rather close $100,000 deals or $10,000 deals? The answer is probably $100,000 deals, but it may a $100,000 deal may take you 20 times as long to close, even though it's only 10 times the size. And so it may be worth saying, well, hey, we actually really only want those $10,000 deals, or a combination of the two, most likely. And then another thing to look at is the quota period. Depending upon your quota period, if you're in a monthly quota cycle or a quarterly or an annual quota cycle, you want that time to close to correspond to that. Because if it takes you 2 quarters to close a deal and you're on a quarterly quota, that may not make a ton of sense. Maybe you either want to adjust your quarter or your quota period or try to reduce that time to close.
Hey, Graham, really interesting question from Catherine on the side here about which we've talked about a lot. When is op creation? Like, when do you consider the prime time to actually have an op created? How do you think about that question?
I think about it, now I come from a pretty traditional SaaS background. I think about it as when the meeting is scheduled. When a meeting is scheduled, that's the moment that an op gets created. And the reason for that is I like to gather as much data as I can. And so one of the important things that I like to look at is how far out do people schedule meetings. So if a meeting is scheduled on the 1st, does it typically happen on the 2nd, or does it usually happen all the way on the 15th? And then how can I reduce that? And so if I'm not paying attention to that, if I only create opportunities as soon as the meeting happens, or as soon as a good meeting happens, you lose out on a ton of data, because you also lose out on, hey, only 50% of the meetings that we schedule are qualified. You may not see that because you don't create an opportunity until it's actually qualified. So I create it as soon as I can, and pretty much as soon as the first meeting is booked. What's your take on that, Ryan?
I agree. I think a couple of things I would add there. One of the things that's really nice in our process is we do automated op creation today. So when someone books a demo on our website, through Chili Piper tied into Zapier, into Salesforce, we're automatically creating an opportunity. And what that does is it allows you to gather data on no-show rates. It allows you to gather data on and true demo occurred rate. Before we had that automated previously, you leave it up to the individual rep to create opportunities, and she may only be creating ops for higher quality conversations. And so you're, to your point, losing a lot of data at the top of the funnel of your true demo occurred rate. And so that one, it saves a lot of time for the reps if the ops are automatically created, but then it also gives you a lot more data to work with. I don't know, Will, Joyce, if you have any other opinions, it'd be interesting to see how you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan and Graham. To me, it's less about the actual definition and figuring out what works for your organization, but making sure that definition has really, I think, 2 key points. It's consistent And it's really, really easy to understand to the point where it's discrete. So it either is or it isn't an opportunity. And it then, as a result, is consistent, because ultimately what we just talked about is a whole bunch of slew of metrics that are built off of that opportunity being created. And if it's not simple to use and very, very consistent, then all of those metrics aren't really good metrics to look at. So more important to the definition is, I think, those two aspects that should form your definition.
That's spoken like somebody who, it sounds like you've seen it the other way in the past, where it's not consistent and it's not, I mean, I know I have. I don't know if you have any horror stories there.
I'll spare the horror stories, but I can share with you all just the fact that when you're in those conversations, like, what is the definition? To me, I'm agnostic. More importantly is that it's consistent and it is discrete. And I think that is what I advocate for in those conversations.
Great.
And I'd also add here that, regardless of how you design the different stages in your pipeline and what you call an opportunity, there are percentage close probabilities for each one, and that feeds into the data that helps your team forecast. Revenue projections and financial forecasts are due in part to pipeline momentum and activity, and so you do want to be careful about what you count as an opportunity, and you also don't want to let sales reps clog up their pipeline with a lot of leads that are poorly qualified. So it all kind of feeds into each other, and maintaining, like Will was saying, something that's consistent and also that's very efficient and allows the reps to focus on the highest quality and highest probability of close is really important.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I agree. I you don't want to create ops as soon as somebody starts cold calling into an organization or what have you, but you don't want it to be and I think that a lot of that also goes to the demo to close rate. Like, demo to close is just one of the things that we would care about. You also care about demo to qualified and qualified to contract sent and contract sent to closed and all of those things. So,
but you care about them. I think you care about them if you have an understanding of what action someone's taking that could move them in some other direction. Like, you do worry a little bit with a lot of these metrics about if you don't understand what's driving it. Like, that's the other big piece. And I think you want to be really clear with, okay, our, demo to qualified rate has dropped off. Like, what do we think the drivers are there? And understand, you want to look at these metrics, but like really actually understand for the ops that didn't get to qualify, like, why was that? And what are the drivers that you can actually fix? So you care about all of them for sure, 100%. The onus is on you to make sure that you understand deeply why they could move, and what could happen to make them move.
Yeah, I mean, and Ryan is kind of speaking from experience here from ourselves. We, as he said, we automated the creation of those opportunities, but historically they weren't. And so what we saw was a drastic drop off in the number of opportunities to qualified, and we were like, oh no, what's going on? And we still had the same number of closed opportunities. I mean, the closed opportunities was increasing, but that ratio was decreasing, and we were digging into it. And it's because of that automation. And so, Will, to your point about standardizing it, we hadn't until Ryan joined us, and now he whipped us into shape when it comes to data, fortunately. So we're more standardized now. There is the last one that, as I ran a 45-person SDR team that was almost exclusively focused on outbound op creation volume, the number of opportunities that our reps are creating is very important to me. I think that no matter what kind of organization you are, if you just rely on inbound, you lose that muscle, you lose the ability to flex that muscle when things go south, and with your inbound. So I think that outbound op creation volume is a very important one to look at. And what good looks like, you're going to see here that we don't really, I mean, there are a couple that I threw out like actual numbers on, but for the most part, I'm not giving anybody a clear answer, which is deliberate because each different organization is entirely different. And it depends so much on that inbound versus outbound. an organization that's 90% inbound only needs 10% outbound. So they may only need to set one meeting a month or what have you. But an important thing to look at as well is the split, the amount of time that AEs spend between those demos and meetings and outbound. And the same goes for the demo to close. If they're running 50 meetings a month, like they probably don't have much time for outbound, nor do they necessarily need to. But if they're only running 5 meetings a month, does that take up all of their time? So
the other thing I think a lot about with outbound, and I know when we were talking last time, Will, you had mentioned your AEs are kind of full funnel too, which ours are as well, is the thing that I think a lot about is you have an outbound op creation volume that is your kind of output bottom funnel metric. But for us, it's also about the activities that will get you there that I care a lot about. So if I get to an end of a quarter and I'm kind of working with an AE from a metrics perspective, first thing I want her to understand is how many emails, LinkedIn messages, calls, how many people do I have to enroll in a cadence mathematically to get me to the number of meetings that will turn into opportunities that will, with this close one rate, which will get me to where I want from an ARR perspective from outbound. And I think it's really important to keep, you're going to take some guesses early on in terms of, okay, I think it's going to be mathematically of the people we add to an outbound cadence, 2% are going to create an opportunity, 5%. There's a bunch of industry standards you can look at and say, this is what percentage of people I think are going to do X, Y, and Z. But I think for an AE that you have who is for full funnel or an SDR, you have to make some estimates on the amount of activity they have to do at the top of the funnel to get to outbound ops, because that number from a percentage is so low in terms of that numerator denominator relationship. You have to basically build that motion, which is what we're doing with our team. And really it's, hey, enroll 10, 20, contacts into an outbound cadence every day. Like build that motion so that you can say at the end of the quarter, okay, maybe I didn't hit my outbound op creation target, but I did everything I could at the top of the funnel to get myself there. And it's because some of our assumptions on some rates were wrong, and you can tweak them. But I think the output metric you're going to watch is op creation volume, but it's important to give your team top of funnel metrics for sure as well in this.
To avoid piling on, the psychology of focusing on outbound op creation versus outbound activity volume is so powerful. If I'm sitting there worrying about how am I going to create this op, my goal is op, my objective is op, what do? How do you help them get to that next level? And it's to what we just talked about or heard from Ryan, which is you have to do the activities, you have to do the LinkedIn messages, you have to do the phone calls. And now you're talking about all things that you have control over, which is when I think about making sure that we're focusing on the right metrics, I really focus on what is the team have to focus on to get to these outcome metrics that we're building financial models off of is more meaningful to me, because I'm giving everyone the same chance at being successful because I'm painting that path for them. This is how many you have to do in order to hit that outbound op creation goal.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing there is that, and we may have discussed this in the precursor meeting to this, but I have a hierarchy of things that I look at, and it's always the very first thing is, did you hit your target? And if you hit your target, I'm like, great. I probably continue looking at the other things, but the rest of it doesn't matter as much. And then the next thing is, did you put in the effort? And if you put in the effort, if you did the activity, then I say, if you didn't, it's a pretty easy fix. Just do it. Because of the math says this is how many you have to do. No wonder you didn't hit your target. But if they did that, that's when I can then look into messaging and coaching and helping them actually hit those targets by improving those things. So that's the way that I tend to look at a metric like this.
Yeah. I think it's also important to remember that for outbound, the average sales cycle is significantly longer than for inbound. And so balancing and making sure the metrics are appropriate and making sure that the sales reps are properly compensated and don't feel too overwhelmed, because if they're relying entirely upon hunting versus farming from the, growth marketing team and other inbound leads, then it can be a bit of a slog. It's exhausting. The efficacy and the response rates of, cold LinkedIn messages or email marketing drip campaigns have gone down because, now the software is just out there that makes it so accessible. So everyone's doing it. And, we also talk about looking at clever ways to engage in doing outbound. So it's not even just doing the same motion over and over again. It's also encouraging a little bit of creativity or thinking outside the box, something that gets the results, to Graham's point, because, if people feel empowered to do something that's perhaps out of what the training manual says, but is going to work, you really want to incentivize and really empower and enable people to do that. And then as sales leaders, we always want to make sure to look at the data and to react and respond to it, because a channel that worked for, let's say, the first 2 or 3 years might get saturated and not work nearly as well by the 4th or 5th year.
The time piece is a really good point, Joyce, and one that it's how, when we talk with a lot of our customers, we consult on this, which is, okay, if you're thinking about making a comp plan for an SDR or for an AE, one of the things you can really think about if they're going to be doing a lot of outbound is going to be, you have some portion of their comp plan be activity driven, where they say, okay, did they check off the box at the top of the funnel? And then some other portion of their comp plan be really bottom funnel, like, ops created or ARR driven from outbound or what have you. And pulling that all in from your CRM into like a commission tracking tool like Quota Path, like a SDR can see, okay, to Will's point, like, I'm doing what I need to do in order to say at the end of the quarter, okay, if I didn't hit the overall target for revenue, at least I know I did the effort at the top of the funnel and being compensated for that, knowing that maybe you had a miss on how long you thought ops were going to take to close for outbound because you hadn't done that before, or your reply rate with, increased adoption of these sales automation tools or whatever. And so I think the visibility and the clear goal setting is really nice, and the compensation piece is a very valuable driver there that we talk a lot about with our customers as well.
Yeah, I think that every person on the line has mentioned control and what people feel like they have control over. And when compensating people, if you're just compensating them based off of the ARR generated off of outbound, and your sales cycle is a year long, then it doesn't necessarily make sense, because for an SDR, they don't have any as much control over that, something they did a year ago. So
yeah, and sometimes it's like, even with, let's say, any habit in life, let's say weight loss, that perhaps the goal is, I want to lose the 15 pounds that I got from the Facebook 15 or freshman 15, whatever people call it. I want to lose 15 pounds. That's a big goal to hit versus, okay, every day I'm going to employ small things. I'll start off with 10 minutes a day of lunges or planks or something, a very something that you can incrementally build up to, and getting that motion in place. And I also really like this question that Catherine asked, and I see a couple of people have supported it, which is, what's the most creative tactic you've had a rep employ outside the box?
Oh, man.
You brought it up, Joyce. Joyce, I'd be interested to hear what you think.
I did. Okay, I guess I set myself up for that, but I really want to hear everyone else's as well. So The funny thing about outside the box is, the first time you get it, or the first time it works, it's amazing. And then everyone realizes it's outside the box, and then people start copying it, and it no longer is. So I suppose, I think, so for a more modern example, the first time I got what seemed like a rep who did a really, really personalized outreach, where they went through the motion of recording a demo, and then having the person sending an email where they had a meme or something with the person's name, that seemed so clever. But then later on, after that started working, everyone was doing it. So now I've noticed that going back to basics is starting to seem outside the box, because everyone's relying so much on automation and these kind of messages online, that doing something that is pseudo in person or more personalized has actually become a lot more sort of a breath of fresh air. Obviously, with the pandemic and COVID, that was also really difficult. But for a while, I saw people kind of going back to the basics of offering to buy someone coffee for a few minutes of their time, or just meeting people and giving like a card or something that was just clever, kind of a different type of business card, something that was again more memorable. But anyway, these are sort of bad examples. I was asking it more because I was curious to hear everyone else's ideas.
So one that worked for me, against me, not against me, worked on me. There we go. That I got was direct mail. I think direct mail is a fascinating one. Now it's a little bit harder in COVID, although less hard now that we're moving back to the office. But I had an envelope that was delivered to me that was all crumpled up. And the envelope was crumpled. The piece of paper inside of it was crumpled. I thought, what? And so I opened it up, and it was like, hey, I crumpled this up and threw it away for you already, so you don't have to. And then like pitched me on something. I can't remember exactly what it was now. Clearly, I don't. But it got a meeting out of me. So this was 5 or 6 years ago when I was in office more, and so pretty fascinating way of I love the idea of things that are scalable but feel personal. And so there are companies that will do handwriting where you record, your handwriting, you handwrite a note, you scan it, you send it into them, and they actually use a machine with a ballpoint pen and so it's actually written in pen using your handwriting and send that out to people.
I'll be a little contrarian on this point and push back a little bit on the things that sort of trick people into thinking it's personalized, but it's really scalable, because I think that people have become very good at calling foul. I mean, of course, there's like deep fakes. You see videos of, things, but everyone's become so attuned to it that the truly personalized things really do start to stand out. I really like another example that Catherine and both Annie have said, but Catherine's was, she got a plush unicorn because she found out that that a target customer really liked unicorns. Sometimes I see things where it borders on this feels like a stalker, like, someone's stalking me. But by and large, because we live in such an automated world, not as many reps take the time to get to know someone. And people, ultimately they're buying from you because they trust you. It is a relationship. Technology can help further the relationship. It can make it more efficient for you to figure out who's most open to those relationships. But the whole reason we have humans doing sales and why everyone on this call is so good at what they're doing is because there is that interpersonal dynamic that you just can't fully automate. And so I love the examples of like even doing a little bit of a dive, like reading through people's Twitter handles or looking at LinkedIn, like looking through the very bottom, like the fun sort of miscellaneous things, like, the animal shelter that they volunteered for, or whatever it is, like figuring something out about them and making that human connection, but then demonstrating to them that you paid attention. You were an active listener, something about them, and you're not just, trying to spam them with automation just like everyone else is. That really does make people stand out. So that's why I mentioned earlier, it's sort of back to the basics. In a world of automation, the thing that stands out are those handwritten notes and plush unicorns and things that feel like they don't scale. But if you can close a deal doing that versus sending out like 1,000 cold emails with 0 deals, and that works.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's interesting. It's like either the super, super truly personalized, which I find really interesting, or the like or not personalized really at all, that are just the emails that I like from SDR are, do you have this problem? And then I can just quickly respond with yes or no, and then have a conversation with people that I have a problem that they're trying to solve or not. And a lot of times when I get those emails, like, do you have a problem with X, commission tracking for your team or what have you, as an example, I can say yes or no. And then to me, the best thing for an SDR to receive is a pure yes or no versus, the whole bevy of case studies and all these different things. And here's why we're amazing. And here's the ROI we're delivering and all this sort of stuff. If I can disqualify myself at the top for an SDR and just say, hey, look, like this is just not a priority for me right now, they're going to be much happier than if they sent, for sequence with, 10 or 15 emails over the course of time, which is something that I think a lot about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it does come back to the topic of data, because, you want to give room for experimentation, but at a certain point, if the experiments don't work, the data will show, the sales efficiency is too low. You're spending too many hours on one or like a small handful of leads, and you're giving them a ton of personalization. You're sending them, all these like very, very thoughtful messages and they're just not responding. Well, maybe either it's the wrong lead. It wasn't, you need to get them out of your pipeline, or maybe you need to just sort of open the aperture a bit, get that funnel bigger, get more leads. The close rates will speak for themselves at the end of the day.
Yeah. And Will, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
Just a prediction for the future. I think we're going to see a lot more memes in the emails, because even when I say it, the panelists all lit up. I think we're going to see some memes in the future in our inboxes after this prediction.
All right, I like that. And Joyce, to your point as well. Like, we went a little going off the rails here a little bit, but I love it. But the data-driven component of it, I had an SDR who spent an hour listening to a podcast where one of his prospects was talked about, and he sent a cold email, a beautifully written cold email referencing something that, and then the person just never responded. And it's fun for us to talk about the things that work, but sometimes spending an hour on this and you don't get the meeting, like, that allows you to do, 8, maybe 10 of those a day. And that's if that's your whole job, listening to podcasts so you can quote them in emails. So I think that there is something to be said about the balance between quality and quantity when outbounding.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, and we see that a lot in our sales team as well. Like, sales team members understand the work that it took to send that email. And so the ones that are kind of shared internally are, oh, this was so great. It was super, super personalized. And my always reaction was, well, that probably took them an hour to put together. And so, if you think about the funnel and how many ops you got to build this quarter, I hope you have 48 hours in a day to do all this research and personalization and stuff. So yeah, we love that experimentation for sure. And then but we think about it a lot as, okay, take the bulk, make sure you get the activities at the high volume with the limited or kind of like average amount of personalization here, and then carve out a bit of your time to do that experimentation so that at least you're gathering enough data without the hyper personalization to see if that's working, and then comparing that to like super hyper personalization.
Right. And even hyper personalization can be made more efficiently. Like, podcasts nowadays are usually transcribed. And even if they're not, you can put them through a dictation or transcription thing. Go into the middle, like go somewhere, let's say 45 minutes into a 1-hour podcast, and find like a little tidbit and just like copy paste and put that in. And so, that maybe the whole thing takes 5 minutes or so to quickly find that snippet. But then the person who receives it thinks like, oh my gosh, this person listened to my entire hour-long podcast because I didn't make that point until close to the end. And so they're very flattered, because part of the whole goal of hyper personalization is to just show that you care, that you're like really dedicated to them. There's something flattering about it. Like, psychologically, a prospect, if they know you spent more time on them, is going to want to be responsive. It's just human reciprocity. They almost feel bad for you. Like, oh gosh, this person sat through my entire hour-long podcast, even if you didn't. So, I think there are lots of ways to balance and to try to get both quantity and quality if we can.
For sure. Well, so I had a list of questions that I wanted to ask you folks as well. And so I want to at least get a couple of them in here. When we're talking about these metrics, obviously we really went heavily into the metrics around outbounding and analyzing that and monitoring that. I think that there is something to be said about, like you said, Joyce, losing weight. I'm a big proponent of the more you measure something, the more likely you are to achieve it. And so I have a goal in 2022. My goal is to run 500 miles. So every day I look at my little chart and I plug in my run from the previous day and I see how I'm doing and how I'm trending and how that's working. How do you give this whether it's outbound metrics or sales metrics, how do you give this information to your reps in a way that is not overwhelming? Because sometimes reps their eyes will just roll back to the back of their heads when you give them too much of this information. So how do you give them this information in an interpretable way that they actually care about and doesn't just become another thing that you harass them about?
When I think about that question, I think about three personas that I'm trying to convince that sales math is important. You have the early adopters, the ones that are just going to jump on, figure it out, need to know how it works before giving it a try. I don't have to worry about them. I actually
Those
use
are the
them.
sales nerds. I call those the sales nerds. That's me. That's this guy. Yeah.
These are the, individuals that will be advocates for the rest of the team. So usually I'll take that cohort of sales nerds and really cultivate them and figure out, how they can be part of the next two phases. The second cohort of people will be ones that are really going to be resistant in terms of, this sounds like more work than value. How does this translate into my day to day? Like a little more resistant, and will take some time. And then the third is going to be, I would call the go with the flow. They're going to just be the middle of the pack. They'll learn on their own, and they're going to really just make sure that they're not going to be the best performers or the lowest performers. They're just going to try to fit in. And so when I think about teaching people sales math and the value of it, I always start with the advocates. If I can convince an advocate, someone that's going to be really excited about it, I'm going to go and take them and teach everything I know to them so that they can start seeding it with the rest of the team. Then I'm going to bring in the cohort of resistors, and I'm going to see, what are they resisting? What specifically are their challenges? And when it comes to outbound sales math, it's activity, conversion rates, meetings, and then what you want to make sure is that they're actually closed won. So you want to figure out what is actually getting to the dollar amount so that you can bring it back to the top of the funnel. But when it comes down to really just making sure that your individual contributors understand this equation, it's as simple as that. What are your activities per ops? What's your quota? That becomes your target for activities. Now, there are ways you can improve that. You can do more activities, or you can improve your conversion rate. How do you think about improving your conversion rate or the quality of it? Once you teach that, that's sales math. Full funnel, it just continues down. So it is that simple. And I think it's really starting with your advocates and convincing them that it's important is, I think, the key to teaching everyone within your organization.
For me, a lot of it is about what is the implicit motivation of your team. I mean, a lot of people in sales are cash motivated, not every single person solely, but a lot of people are. And so I like to work backwards from their quota, and then what is it going to take to get to your quota? And here's the breakdown to your point. And, I know Kelly just shared it. We have a sales kind of funnel calculator that we built that does this. It's basically like, here's your activities and the conversion rate, and then the ops created and the average contract value. And you give those tools to your team. Like, I think it's really important to start at the bottom, work your way back up mathematically, and show your math, and just say, hey, you want to close 50K in outbound revenue close one ARR this quarter. That is going to require you to have this much in qualified, this much in demo occurred, and this much in demo appointment based on historicals. That means this many ops we got to create. That means this many activities, and just be super transparent about your math and the path to their success. That has been very helpful for us. And you go all the way to, and then the other piece, which Will, you brought up earlier, was about, what's in their control. And that's super important too. It's like, what is the one thing that is definitively in their control? It's how they can add people to cadences and how high a quality of a conversation or a demo they can have. Like, they can give really good demos, and they can make sure that their demo to qualified rate is high because they're having a good conversation with a prospect. They can add people to cadences. Those are like the two, and then they can close deals down the funnel as well. But if you think about the things that are in their control and you give them the math, that becomes a very helpful set of tools and then you can set. I also like all this information to be super public. So we use Mode as a BI and analytics tool. We've built a rep leaderboard so that reps can see side by side the number of activities they've done versus their peers. And it becomes a competitive thing for the org too, which has been super helpful for us as well.
I'm curious to hear from everyone the balance between, having all reps see the sales math versus setting very clear guidelines. So, let's say if it's a SMB sales and the ACV is between 2,000 to 5,000 a month for a subscription, telling the reps, like, in order to reach quota, you need to close, X number of deals, which means you probably need to have about 50 demos per week or something along those lines. I'm just throwing it out there as like, how much do you prefer having each rep kind of looking at and maintaining their own process versus just setting guidelines, but then helping them calibrate if those guidelines aren't leading to the appropriate outcomes?
Yeah. So when I ran my SDR org, I would have a monthly one-on-one with every one of my reps where I would plug in their trailing 90 days. This was your conversion rate on this. This was your conversion rate on this. And sometimes it was like, way too good or way too bad. And if it was way too bad and it said like, oh, you have to do 50,000 cold emails this month, like, obviously I would fudge it a little bit and be like, well, we can work on these things with you and improve this from 1% to 5%, closer to the team average. And so I think that this is the authorship equals ownership idea, that if somebody feels like they were bought into it and they were a part of setting these targets, they're going to own them a lot more. So just by creating this as a one-by-one person, creating it as like an organization-wide metric, that may be helpful, but for specific people, it may also be helpful for them to see the exact math behind it. Now, I didn't give people the option for it. In hindsight, maybe I should have, but yeah, that's how I think about it.
Yeah, doubling down, I believe in transparency, and I'm way less successful at telling people what to do than I am with teaching them how to fish. And so my MO is, if you're really interested in understanding how the financial models work and forecast, I will 100% teach you everything I know, because I'm going to need your help. Because once you start understanding how it works, you now are understanding all of the challenges and the decisions that leaders have to make at all times. And so having that additional advocate going, hey, if I send one more email a day, that's actually going to be, by the end of the year, one more deal for the business. And they can translate that really quickly. It becomes what Graham said about owning it from an author perspective. And so we have regular QBR conversations where we give them the baseline for sure, but then they plug in their own, because to me, I think we talked about the concept of hierarchy of metrics. You hit your objectives, high five. How'd you do it? What can we learn? You hit your activities, but you didn't hit your outcomes. I'm going to help you. You don't do either one of them. That's where we have, I think, the biggest challenge. And that environment makes it a lot easier to manage a team, because you know how each of those three cohorts are working and what you need to do in order to fix it.
I do also worry a lot about an org where you have wildly different rates, either positive or negative, in between team members. Like I know that some people, I've worked at some companies before where they said, oh, John's a really great closer. His qualified to close rate is super high. And my pushback there is like, why is John so much better than everybody else? John should teach everybody else how to be a better closer. And so I think the transparency also, yeah, you talk about people who are behind, but it also allows you to flag people who are way ahead of their peers and be like, how do we pull that skill set out and teach the other people how to do it? Because at the end of the day, you're all kind of collectively working towards ARR growth, even if everybody has individual quotas. They all want the company to succeed overall. And so I think that transparency is massively important on both sides of the coin.
Or John needs more ops, more swings, which would be even better for the business too.
Or John's or John's qualifying too few ops, and is leaving a bunch of money on the table. Or that's where all this stuff becomes super nuanced, and it's where you have to step a little bit back from the metrics themselves.
So we only have a few minutes left here, and I wasn't planning on doing this, but like, does anybody have a unique way, like a unique metric, sales metric that they really like looking at for anything, you know, like something slightly wacky out there, or something that you may not have heard of before? I know I'm jumping this on y'all. I see in the chat positive reply rates. I think that's an awesome one. We pay a lot of attention to reply rates to emails, and open rates to emails. That's one that people always be like, oh, I got, you know, what email subject line is the highest open rate? And we used to, at my last company, we used to joke about like, what would be the email that would get the highest open rate? And so the best one we were able to come up with was your kid bit me. I think that's like, I think you'd get like a 90% open rate, but it wouldn't be positive open rates because your kid bit me. It has nothing to do with, you know, commission software. Nobody's gonna respond to that. And so it's those positive open rates, positive reply rates that I see in the chat there. That's pretty.
I'm
cool.
thrilled about negative reply rates too. Like if you know, I'm in a contrarian fact. Like if somebody's just like, no, I'm just don't want this, right? I would much rather take a negative reply rate versus a no, just nothing, no activity.
Yeah, best response in sales is yes. The second best response is no.
So I just look at it as aggregate reply rate and just say, hey, like at least they understood what you were trying to ask them if they needed help solving, and they said, no, I don't need help. Now you can push back and say, hey, you weren't asking the question the right way, you weren't presenting value. But I think negative, I look a lot at on a rep level, like negative reply rates for cadences as well.
I think that to some of the point that we mentioned earlier about having ownership mentality, having a general sense of the health of the organization and the viability of the business model, so the CAC to LTV ratio, is something that on a high level the team should be aware of. Obviously, it's more the onus of the VP of sales or the CRO or the CEO to make sure that all of that is in check. But you know, the sales reps should also have an understanding overall of the business model, of like understanding, like, you know, I need to on average bring in about 4 to 5 times the revenue of, you know, even my own paycheck, because otherwise this company is probably not super sustainable. So on some levels, like if that ownership mentality really percolates throughout the organization, just understanding the basic unit economics of the business, I think is quite important for everyone.
I have one metric that I look at a lot, which is how many opportunities are open with a close date in the past. That is a metric that I look at to just give me a sense of how are people actually updating close dates as a means of pipeline health. There's many others, but I start with that one because if you're not maintaining your close date, you know, then can you really trust your forecast?
Yeah, I've seen forecast accuracy as a metric as well. Like, okay, beginning of the quarter or beginning of the month, depending on your sales cycle, like where are you going to end? You know, a professional commit, and then how accurate people are. And everybody always celebrates people who are like, yeah, beginning of the month, oh, I'm going to close 50 grand this month. And then they close 100 grand. It's like, oh yeah, great work, Ryan. But then it's like, well, you can't trust that person. Do they truly know their business? Are they, and this kind of goes to Joyce, to your thing, like how bought in are they? I love that, of like, how much do they know your business? How much do your reps know your business? And if all they know is just how much your product costs and how to pitch it, that shows me that it's not as bought in of a sales organization.
The other one I spend a lot of time looking at, because we are per user priced, is I look a lot at like 6 months after a contract sign per rep, like how much expansion has come from those accounts, because we do have account managers who operate on that, but you can really see who are the AEs on your team who are bringing in people who are like bought into the vision and adding new users and expanding over time, even if that's not in their purview, right? We do a handoff at the point of contract signature to an account manager, but you do see really interesting results on a per team member basis of who are the reps who are really good at like showing value early on and then having them bought in to expand their relationship with you over a longer period of time. Now, we don't do anything from a compensation perspective there, because like they're, unless they churn early or what have you, but it is a helpful metric to look at in terms of reps' ability to drive like long-term value understanding.
That's an interesting one though, Ryan. And I haven't looked at this, but you also might argue that rep didn't do a good job of like predicting the growth. Obviously you want to grab as much of that value up front as you can. And so like somebody says, hey, we have 50 reps today, we may be 75 by 3 months from now. A really good rep can grasp 60 of that, or all 75 of it, or create a structure or contract. And so I wonder if there's, but a kind of sleazy rep might say, okay, well then let's do 200 people, 200 reps. And so all of a sudden, I guess that usage could be an interesting one too. So awesome. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left here. Joyce, Will, I don't know if you have any parting words, any parting plugs here. Always happy to have y'all chat.
I think it's evident that there's more metrics to look at than you have time to even consume them. Focus is key. So stick with the ones until you get repeatable success, then move on to the next one.
And I would just say metrics are very important to track, but also, trust that data. If something's not working, then don't throw good money after bad. It's all about continuous learning, coaching, and improving our systems. And that's what the data is really good for.
Yeah. Ryan, any last parting words for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like the point on picking a couple and sticking with those metrics, and then just really understand what moves them. I think that's the big thing. Like, it's a waste of your time to say, oh, this metric went up and then went down, if you don't understand why. So understand deeply like the human backed motivation behind the moving of a metric, and what drives change, so that you can turn around and go tell your board or your CEO why this metric moved and what you're doing to fix it, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I think that don't lose the motivational component of those metrics as well. Is that those can be coaching, those can be, people lose sight of compensation as a component. Obviously, I talk a lot about compensation. I'll do my Drink Your Ovaltine plug for Quota Path. I think there's a request demo button somewhere here if you click that. But the more you focus on the metrics that drive the motivation, the better off you'll be.
And that people can control. I think that's the other final thing. Give people metrics that they actually can own versus just ones they don't understand.
This was great. We are going to wrap things up here. Can everyone hear me? Sometimes this. Yes. We're going to wrap things up here. But first, I want to say thank you, everyone, for showing up today and for attending. We love having you here, especially on a Monday, so we can start our week very well. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, and thank you, Quota Path. I learned a lot today. And while the panelists and I hang out backstage, the MSP team will make sure you will find the recording, the key takeaways, and some resources on our website. And once you are there to check the recording, don't forget to check our upcoming events. And as Graham says, we have a request a demo button right over there. You can click and learn more about Quota Path. And I hope you all have a great week. I'll see you next time. And don't forget to check our upcoming events. Please, panelists, let's go backstage and hang out a little bit. Bye, everyone.